why don't we go ahead and get to this, the weapons segment.
Yeah.
This is a fascinating media story, policy story. The fact that it's actually not a bigger scandal really just tells you a lot exactly about how the US media, who they respond to, and what criticism they have. So, a couple of days ago, CBS News committed an act of journalism. They both went to Ukraine and researched, hey, these hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons that are flowing into Ukraine, tens of billions of it from the United States alone, how's that going in Ukraine? Is it actually going to the front line where these weapons are needed? And here's what they found. Now, keep in mind, this video is no longer available on the CBS News website, and we had to actually go to kind of great lengths in order to just get a clip of it. But we think it's important because remember now, they have since taken it down and say, after criticism from the Ukrainian government, that they need to do, quote, more research. Let's take a listen to the original segment that they aired.
In the past 2 months, we've moved weapons and equipment to Ukraine at record speed. Drones, grenade launchers, machine guns.
We're seeing this incredible, historic flow of weapons coming into Ukraine. Do we have any sense as to where they're going?
We don't know. There is really no information as to where they're going at all.
You know, all this stuff goes to the border, and then kind of like something happens, it kind of like 30% maybe reaches its final destination.
30%? Are you concerned about weapons getting in the wrong hands?
I don't care at all whether that happens.
What sort of a unit do you command? Can't say. Okay.
You know, there are like power lords, oligarchs, political players.
One of the biggest targets are convoys like this transporting weapons.
Вот там был поезд, где мы ехали, только что въебались туда, прямо в поезд. За деревьями. Вот там Орлан идет.
Europeans had come to believe that that project of integration had effectively meant the banishment of armed force. All of a sudden, not far from the borders of the EU, was the most significant war since World War II.
Interesting, right? I sure as hell am very interested.
Yeah.
Well, CBS News since, though, let's put this up there on the screen, has now added an editor's note to their story. Here's what they say, quote, "This article has been updated to reflect changes since the CBS Reports documentary was filmed. The documentary is being updated. James Oman says that the delivery has significantly improved since filming with CBS in late April. The government of Ukraine notes that the U.S. Defense Attaché Brigadier General arrived in Kyiv in August 2022 for arms control and monitoring." So what they point to is that they basically had significant pushback from the U.S. military and from the Ukrainian government at the airing of this story. So much so that they've gone ahead and deleted that segment. Now, here's the thing. Why did it need to be deleted at all? Whenever they say perhaps it would create a false impression, listen, if the fact that only 30% of the weapons were getting there in April, that's a good story too.
Even if they have improved,
right.
Which there's no indication that they have, by the way. I mean, you'll recall when the massive aid package passed through, Rand Paul said, hey guys, how about we add an amendment onto this so we have an inspector general to keep track of what's going on here, and this gets voted down in massive bipartisan fashion. So there is no actual indication that arms delivery has improved.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, there's the opposite. We talked about how the Europeans are raising red flags about these weapons getting onto the black market. But even if it has improved, the fact that it was going so poorly back in April, I mean, those weapons are all out there now. So that is still an incredibly important story. When I was prepping for this segment yesterday, I went to actually watch the documentary because I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to make sure I have all the facts. I want to see what they say and have the full context, not just this clip. And when I clicked on it, it just went to like, this page not found.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I was like, and the fact that I hadn't seen any commentary online about it either, about like, oh, I can't believe they pulled this thing. I was like, what the hell is going on here? So that's when we started digging. And sure enough, it looks like the Ukrainian government and the military freaked out and bullied them into pulling the whole damn thing. Now listen, it is pretty common in media, when you have a story that's provocative or contentious or disputed or whatever, yeah, you add in maybe an editor's note, maybe you put, after the fact, we got comment, here's what they say, here's their side of the story. But to pull the whole thing entirely is quite extraordinary and definitely not something that they routinely do when it's, as long as the narrative fits like the sort of like liberal view of the world, it doesn't matter if it's blatantly wrong, they'll leave that shit up.
Of course. And listen, like I said, it's a good story, even if it's outdated. Just say, all right,
this was the state of play in April.
This was the state of play in April.
Things
By the
might
way,
have
that's
changed.
actually very interesting to me because early April is when some of the craziest fighting was happening. Remember, that was Kyiv, that was like the Russian military, the pincer movement, the fallback, all the way now.
That's when we were rushing shipments in like nobody, like literally we've never seen before.
The most decisive moments in the military campaign, we're going to be studying that for decades in terms of what exactly happened. So, hey, if only 30% of the weapons were making it to the front line at that time, that's actually quite interesting. So they note that this analyst, Jonas Oman, who is a Lithuanian military expert, had the founder and CEO of an organization that was meeting with supplying frontline units, has now since estimated or re-estimated what exactly that is. But just so you know, he won't give you a number. So in April, he said 30 to 40%. Today, he says the situation has, quote, significantly improved. But he's not giving.
What are we talking? We're talking about 45% now?
Right,
We're talking about 50%?
50, 75.
What are we talking about here?
Even if 25, 25 is kind of insane. Like, where 1/4 of all these weapons just going? And also, I love how they're like, the government of Ukraine now notes that the U.S. defense attaché has arrived in Kyiv in August 2022 for arms control and monitoring. I'm like, so? Okay. Is he doing anything? So he arrived, okay? It's August 8th. So that means he wasn't there until a week ago. So then what was going on in July and June and all these other billions of dollars of shipments? And lo and behold, let's go and throw this up there. Of course, we are now readying an additional $1 billion that is headed over to Ukraine, one of the largest so far. It's munitions for long-range weapons and armored vehicle transport vehicles. Exactly, by the way, what he was showing in that documentary. So, in a way, I do applaud this guy, this journalist, for taking on this task. It takes an extraordinary amount of courage, knowing how much pushback that you're going to get in the current environment. But at the end of the day, they went ahead and folded. And I think it's crazy because, as you said, there's no outrage around this at all. This is a legitimate act of journalism, which the government and our military and their military pushed back so hard that they have deleted, basically disappeared the entire thing.
I wonder if these news outlets pulled their Ghost of Kyiv stories that turned out to be total propaganda.
Great point.
Did the Ukrainian and also remember, listen, it is very difficult to cover a war.
Yes.
When you're kind of dependent on what the governments involved are telling you. In fact, we are more dependent for and understand the Ukrainian side on the Ukrainian government than we are on the Russian side, because with the Russian side, we have intelligence assets. We have a well-developed program to figure out what is the discrepancy between what they're saying and what the reality is, and put your deep state spin on that or whatever. On the Ukrainian side, we didn't have any of those assets developed, so we're more dependent on just whatever the Ukrainian official line is, and the Times, the Post, whatever. They report this stuff often as if it is outright fact. That goes unchallenged. But the minute there's a narrative that, challenges whether the Ukrainians are, whether this is how this is all going, whether Ukrainians are as the government, as perfect and noble as they're sort of presented in the press, and Zelensky the hero and all that stuff, then they come in and they completely freak out. It is incredibly revealing.
Well, it's very upsetting. We're going to continue to try and track this, but look, at the end of the day, the story was spot on in terms of we don't know what the hell is going on over there. And, listen, I can say that the Ukrainian cause is far more just. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some accountability. They would be nowhere. Their government would be gone and their country would be dead. We're literally without us. So don't we get some sort of a say about what happens with our weapons? And let's say this. If it was the first time that something like this had happened, you could be forgiven, right? It's 1986. The Soviet Union is fighting. And you're like, hey,
we haven't
these
learned
guys,
these lessons yet.
These Afghans, they're good guys. They're just fighting the Soviets, anti-communism. We say, hey, all right, we're going to and then, some of these Stinger missiles end up in the hands of some bad dudes and end up being used in the Civil War and the Taliban, and we lose all this military equipment. And it's 1990. And we're like, all right, you know what? We're going to learn our lesson. That happened before I was born.
Right.
And we keep doing it, the same thing, over and over again. Afghanistan, then Syria. I mean, Iraq, obviously.
Yeah.
You can't even forget that one. Afghanistan, Iraq, then Libya, then Syria, then now this. It's like, when will we ever learn our lesson? As the Rand Paul thing, inspector. Do you know how much we have learned from the Special Inspector General of Afghan Reconstruction?
Oh,
that guy, John Saagar, he's a hero.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of corruption in America, the U.S. and Afghan side that he exposed for decades. If you read those, you knew Kabul was going to fall. That's why it didn't surprise me at all whenever it happened.
The Soviet-Afghan lesson is also instructive because part of the reason that we threw in with the groups that we did was because they were the most, sort of most ruthless. So that made them the most effective in terms of our cause. We also trusted the Pakistanis to tell us who we should be funneling weapons to. But, you know, I'm also interested in the part of the documentary that they tease there where they've got the guy saying he's not going to tell you what type of unit he's in charge of. You know, I want to know more about that guy. I want to know more about what's going on there and who exactly these weapons are going to. But it's pretty extraordinary that this got pulled and there was nary a peep about it. And this was a massive expenditure of resources from CBS News to put reporters on the ground and get all this footage. Very dangerous. I mean, journalists, I'm sure, put their lives at risk in order to get this footage.
You could see it, literally. It was in the line of fire. Yeah.
Anytime you have, journalists on the ground in a war zone, this is not just, you're there on your own figuring it out. No, there's a whole team around you and fixers that are involved. I mean, it was a very elaborate, costly, dangerous process to gather this footage, and now it's disappeared. And I wonder, do you think they're going to update it and put it back up again now?
I don't know.
I bet it's just dead forever.
I do think they're going to have to update it just because, well, now that we'll have done a segment on it, I'm just going to assume some others will
probably going to pick up on it.
Look, it is certainly revealing.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.